Two banks buy the same artificial intelligence, the same models, the same vendors, roughly the same budget. A year later, one has lifted its returns by 5%, the other by 50%. The difference is not the model, it is the operating model. This is the part of the AI story the vendor demo never shows you. The technology is commoditizing fast. The same frontier models now sit behind the same handful of cloud interfaces available to every competitor you have. So the model is no longer the edge. What separates the bank that earns 5% from the bank that earns 50% is the machinery around the model, how the work is redesigned, how freed capacity is converted, and how the whole thing is governed. I call that machinery the Operating-Model Multiplier, and if you have followed this series, you have met it before. In the boardroom equation, the operating model was the multiplier term, the thing that turned investment into return. We named it then. Today, we open it up. Start with the uncomfortable number. By some estimates, a reported 73% of banking AI pilots stall before they ever reach production, not because the models failed, but because the organization around them did. The banks pulling ahead are not the ones with better algorithms. They are the ones that rebuilt the operating model to absorb the algorithms. Bolt AI onto a legacy process, and you get a reported 5 to 15% local gain, most of which never reaches the profit and loss statement. Redesign the operating model around that same capability, and the reported impact runs 20 to 50%, and it compounds across the enterprise. The same technology, wildly different return. Notice what that means for a board. The asset you can purchase has stopped being the asset that pays. Every rival licenses the same intelligence within a week. None can copy how your bank works. The edge has quietly moved from what you buy to what you build around it. So the real question for a banking leader is not which model to buy. It is what is our multiplier and which part of the operating model is holding it down now. The reason most banks get the small number is that bolting on is easy and rewiring is hard. Buying a model is a procurement decision. You can do it in a quarter, put it in a board deck, and point to a demo. Redesigning how 3,000 people actually work, the handoffs, the controls, the incentives, who decides what once a machine drafts the first version, is slow, political, and impossible to photograph. So banks spend where it is easy and treat the people and the process as a footnote. But a bolt-on sits on top of a process built for humans doing the whole task. The AI does its slice faster, then the work hits the same queue, the same approval, the same handoff, and the gain dissipates before it ever becomes money. The capability went up, the operating model did not, and the multiplier stayed near 1. We have known the size of that gap for a while. The unanswered question is the useful one. What precisely sets the multiplier, and how would you measure your own? So let us make the mechanism explicit. Think of realized AI value as a simple product, raw capability, multiplied by M, the operating model multiplier. Raw capability is what you buy, the model, the vendor, the compute, and for two competing banks it is nearly identical. M is what you build. At the bolt-on bank it sits below 1, and the operating model actually destroys value, leaking most of what the AI produces. At the rewired bank it runs 2 or 3 times the same capability multiplied into the profit and loss. And here is the crucial property. M is itself a product, not a sum. It is set by 3 levers, and 0 on any one of them is 0 overall. You do not get partial credit for getting one lever right. The multiplier compounds only when all 3 clear 1. There are 3 levers, and you can diagnose any bank against them. Lever 1 is rewire. Redesign the process around the AI instead of bolting the AI onto the process. This is the whole distance between the 5 to 15% number and the 20 to 50% number. The signature of a bank that rewires is its spending mix, and BCG's 70-20-10 rule is the cleanest diagnostic. In the banks that win, about 70% of the effort goes to people and process, 20% to the data and technology backbone, and only 10% to the model itself. The banks that fail invert it, heavy on the model, light on the workflow. Read the ratio and you can predict the return before a single model is chosen. Lever 2 is Reallocate. We spent a whole video on this in the visibility trap, so I will be brief. Free time is not profit until someone reclaims it. By some estimates, up to 2/3 of it leaks straight back into low-value work unless capacity is redeployed or removed. Freed capacity becomes money only two ways: move those people onto higher-value work or take out the cost. When the capacity has nowhere to go, leaders should not book it as return. Lever 3 is Regovern. The four guardians we walked earlier, the gate, the guardrail, the ledger, the named owner, are exactly this lever. After SR 26-2, they belong at the enterprise operating model layer, not inside a model risk silo. That placement is what lets the highest value, highest risk work, revenue, and autonomous agents scale at all, instead of stalling forever in review. Governance, placed right, becomes the rail the work moves on, not the brake on it. Put the three together and you have the multiplier. Rewire raises the ceiling, Reallocate banks the gain, Regovern lets the work scale, pull one lever and the return nudges, pull all three and it compounds across the enterprise. Look at where the evidence points, and it is consistent. The 70-20-10 rule is not one firm's opinion. It originates with BCG and is corroborated by McKinsey's QuantumBlack, by Deloitte, and by research out of MIT Sloan. The finding that roughly 70% of AI value comes from people and process, and only 10% from the model, holds across the industry. The lesson repeats every time. The winners out-execute, they do not out-purchase. Frontier models becoming a commodity does not weaken that rule. It strengthens it, because the one thing money can buy is now the one thing everyone already has. And the stakes are rising, not falling. BCG projects that agentic AI, autonomous systems that reason and act on their own, will climb from about 17% of AI value today to roughly 29% by 2028 across industries. Agents are far less forgiving of a weak operating model than a chatbot is. They need clean data, redesigned workflows, and enterprise governance to function at all. So the multiplier does not stay constant. As the work gets more autonomous, the penalty for a disjointed operating model compounds, and the gap between the 5% bank and the 50% bank gets wider, not narrower. The banks that internalize this now will compound the lead. The ones that keep buying models keep funding pilots that never ship. The payoff shows up where boards actually look, in return on equity and risk-adjusted margin and a measurable cost of capital advantage. Most banks treat the model as the asset. The durable compounding asset is the operating model around it. So here is what to do on Monday. Run the multiplier audit, 4 steps. First, measure M. For each scaled use case, compare the vendor's raw capability against the return that actually reached the profit and loss, and the gap is your operating model multiplier. Second, find the broken lever, rewire, reallocate, or regovern. Third, reweight to 70-20-10, move the spend off the model and onto process and capability. Fourth, lock the capacity, make freed capacity a board track number, not a slide. None of this requires a better model than your rival has. It requires a better operating model, the one advantage that cannot be bought. Stop buying the model. Start building the multiplier. Turn AI into real business value at AI Business Architect New Analysis every week. If this changed how you see AI value, subscribe.